All right, everyone, welcome. I'm Ruth Solkowski. I'm president of Don Johnson Incorporated, and with me is Karen Bess, who lost her voice. So she's the crazy one doing the circles on the computer screen with her mouse. No, actually, she's answering questions and that type of thing that are coming in. We are honored today, and I feel like we're all fortunate. I feel very fortunate to have Dr. Denise DeCoste with us. She is the author of Protocol for Accommodations in Reading, also known as PAR. And Denise has really had a lot of experience in the classroom and in a large district, and then just is a really brilliant person who really digs into the research and does really well-informed decisions and the processes to help us think differently about how to be more systematic in our implementation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Denise, and welcome, and thanks for everyone who's attending.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. If you're having any trouble hearing me, let me know. Ruth, am I coming across okay?
You sound great.
Okay, excellent. Any other announcements and what we can...
I think we're ready. We're good to go.
Let me just talk about what we're going to cover today.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good to go. All right. So thanks for joining me today. I'm coming to you from just outside Washington, D.C. It's sunny here. I hope this weather is good where you are. It's nice to be able to do this from the comfort of my own chair. So I'm glad to be with you. The topics that we're going to cover today in today's webinar on PAR is we're going to talk about the legal and educational imperatives for accommodations. It's really a shifting landscape right now regarding accommodations, and I want to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about just briefly on research on accommodation decision-making and why decision-making is an issue as it relates to accommodations. Then I'm going to talk briefly about the PAR process, just give you the bare bones on that. And then I'm going to talk about how to get started. So those are the topics I'm going to cover today. I think we're going to open with a poll. Karen, do you want to load that poll? That's great. So I'd like to sort of ask you a question first. Which of the following issues regarding accommodations is most problematic in your district? And we're really talking about reading accommodations today. So you can read through those options and pick the one that is most suited to your district. Give everybody a bit of time to do that.
Great. We have about 50% of the votes in, so keep going, everyone.
All right. Some of you may be watching this as a group. You can just have one member of your group respond.
It's looking good. So how about we give 10 more seconds?
Countdown.
4, 3, 2, 1. All right, everyone, last click. And we're going to close it, and then you need to hit share.
That's another.
Oh, and we have one additional, teachers under others. Teachers don't want to take the time to learn what to do or even train the students to do it. So time and teacher issues. So.
Yeah, so that's not uncommon. Some people are saying that about a third of the audience is saying they still don't have enough text readers to go around for their kids. The largest response, however, is no clear process for making decisions regarding, accommodations. That got probably cut off. It was too long a sentence or too long a phrase. So yeah, and I'm glad you're here today because that's exactly what we're going to talk about, the rationale for that. So hopefully after today you'll have more language to sort of talk about the people, to talk with the people in your district about why having a clear process is so important going forward, especially in light of today's legal and educational imperatives. Okay, so Ruth, can you hand the screen back over to me? And I think we'll get my screen going. Can you see my screen now?
We can. We just need you to, yeah, it's in PowerPoint like the slide. There you go. Great.
Okay. So I'm actually want to talk to you a little bit again, as I said, about some of the imperatives specific to accommodations. There are imperatives both at a national level and at a state level. At a national level, you're probably very aware that IDEA and No Child Left, oops, that's supposed to be No Child Left Behind, No Child Left Behind have made it very clear that we need to measure students' progress, and we need to measure those students' progress using accommodations if those students qualify. So college, and the other thing that's been really important is the whole push towards standards for college and career readiness, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. I'm going to talk about Smart Park and Smarter Balanced. You probably know about those. If not, you're going to get a little very short primer on it today, but I will encourage you to go to their websites to read more about it in detail. At the state level, the imperatives are clearly, your IEP documentation, and your IEP probably has some section that relates to accommodations and which accommodations are allowed for students. Most of you probably know about the AIM process, which is part of IDEA, which is making sure that students have access to accessible instructional materials. Oh, I can't believe we're finding all these typos on the first screen. State accommodation guidelines. Many of you probably have state accommodation guidelines. So, and those guidelines are the ones that you probably look to for direction on accommodations. And yet what we find in most state accommodation guidelines, what most people report, is that those guidelines are just sort of, general guidelines. They don't really give you a lot of specific processes for making decisions about what accommodation is best. Okay, so again, IDEA have set the stage for using standardized assessments to measure the progress of all students, and we know that test scores really do influence key decisions regarding placement for students, sometimes for graduation, and people are looking at data as it regards school effectiveness. The college and career readiness standards, the Common Core literacy standards have been adopted by 45 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories. You may be one of the 5 states that is not participating in the Common Core literacy standards, but what I often find is that those states have standards of their own. So the whole college and career readiness standards has been a real game change for us in education. The standards, according to these authors, who write a really good book, it's a real common sense kind of book about the Common Core standards, says that the standards represent the most sweeping reform, I've got my panel in the way, of the K-12 curriculum that has ever occurred in this country. It is safe to say that across the entire history of the American education, no single document will have played a more influential role over what is taught in our schools. That's a pretty strong statement from Calkins and her associates. Now, what drove the development of Common Core standards, and in particular reading standards, is that it is estimated that if assessed today, only 15% of students would perform at levels suggested by the Common Core standards. And Common Core standards represent what kids need to be able to do by the time they graduate from high school. And back mapping from there, what kids need to be able to do at different grade levels as it relates to literacy. The other thing that drove these standards is that 25 years ago, 95% of the jobs required low skills, but today only 10% of the jobs require low skills, which means our kids need to get out there with higher level reading and writing abilities once they graduate and either go into the college or the job market. And we also know that under No Child Left Behind, their reading scores kind of have been flatlining. So people are still very, very concerned with getting reading scores to increase and also to decrease the discrepancy across races as well. So students must be able to according to Common Core, be able to comprehend texts of steadily increasing complexity as they progress through school. They have to be able to read and write independently and proficiently the kinds of complex tests commonly found in college and careers. Shanahan and Snow have a talk about this models of comprehension development. And at the very bottom level, students want to have fluent word reading and core comprehension. But beyond that, students need to get to the point where they have an elaborated understanding of the text, and then beyond that, they have to have a deep disciplinary comprehension of text. So that's talking about real being able to comprehend content, whether it's social studies or history or civics or whatever topic that might be being presented at the school level. However, it is very clear in the Common Core state standards that teachers are invited to use assistive technology and other scaffolds to be sure that every learner has access to the thinking curriculum that is at the heart of the Common Core standards. So assistive technology is very much in the picture when it comes to the Common Core standards and the need for accommodations. Now, AIM, I just want to make sure everybody knows about AIM. AIM is under IDA. IDEA requires districts to provide accessible instructional materials. The important thing to know about AIM is that before you can address which print materials to obtain and where to get those specialized formats, whether it's digital text or Braille or whatever, you first need to have some kind of evidence-based process to match formats to students' needs. So before you spend all this time gathering your materials for a particular student, you want to make sure that that format is the best format for that student. So AIM has published, and you can go to this website for more information on AIM, but AIM has these process guides, and the first thing that it talks about is there a need? So you have to establish that first. What works best for a student in terms of reading accommodations? And then you can decide which print materials to obtain and where to go get those specialized formats, whose job it is to select or obtain or create the materials, and then how to distribute those materials. But the first thing you're going to have to do is to figure out what's best for a student. In practice, in theory and in practice, accommodations are intended to reduce or eliminate the effects of a student's disability. They are not intended to reduce learning expectations. They are meant to level the playing field without providing an undue advantage. And that's kind of the measuring stick of the best use of accommodations. Now, if you've not heard, you may be part of PARC, your district, and in your state may be a part of the PARC or be a part of Smarter Balanced. In PARC, 19 states and territories, and you can just go to the PARC website to find out, if you're not sure which one applies to your state. PARC applies to 19 states and territories, and Smarter Balance applies to 25 states and territories. Some of them are, that doesn't, well, you can go and find out more information at the websites about these things. But they look, PARC, for example, looks at universal design support. So they talk about embedded supports. What PARC is doing is really making sure that in the next generation of online tests that measure college and career readiness, that there are some universally designed supports embedded into the test formats. Now, these test formats are supposed to be ready for next year, the 2014-2015 year. And the reason I'm talking about it now is because if you have students who you think are going to qualify for these accommodations, whether it's through PARC, whether you're a PARC state or a Smarter Balance state, you need to start documenting what works for a student, and you need to have some rationale to go forward when you're developing a profile for your student in readiness for this by 2014 and 2015. So PARC talks about embedded supports. Those are the things that are going to be universally designed tools that are just embedded into the online testing. They also talk about accessibility features, which you can turn on and off. And then at the bottom, you see that small circle down the bottom. Only a small percentage of kids are going to qualify for some accommodations beyond that. Now, they're under PARC, and I'm just talking about the PARC states right now, the the decisions will be made by IEP and 504 planning teams, and the kinds of special access accommodations for students with disabilities are the ones that you're probably most familiar with: calculation devices, text-to-speech or read-aloud, scribing, human interpreter or video, and word prediction. So those are some of the accommodations that are talked about for students with disabilities in PARC. Now PARC, this is actually a July 2013 update, and there should be more information coming out this fall, so you should stay tuned for that on the PARC website. But the accommodations for text-to-speech for the literacy assessments are intended to provide access to printed or written texts to the PARC assessments to a very small number of students with disabilities who would otherwise be unable to participate because their disability severely limits or prevents them from decoding printed text. So that's the language regarding text-to-speech for students who are struggling with reading. Now, again, the IEP or 504 planning teams will be the ones that have to consider whether a student is eligible for an accommodation. But one of the things that you should know is this accommodation is really only intended for a small percentage, and in fact both PARC and Smarter Balanced will be periodically running reports to make sure that there is not a high percentage of students who are getting these accommodations. So you really have to have some justification for students using accommodations, and it's really not intended for students who are just slightly or moderately below grade level, according to PARC. In making decisions whether to provide students with these particular accommodations, again, this is according to the PARC description, it has to be a disability that severely limits or prevents a student from accessing printed text, even after attempts to teach the student to do so, and the student's unable to decode printed text and read fluently. So that's, again, part of the language of PARC. For a 504 and for an IEP, the other thing that teams need to consider when they make decisions about whether a student can receive this accommodation going forward is the student has to have had access to printed text during routine instruction through a reader or other text-to-speech kind of device or other kind of read-aloud. So it's basically establishing that it's setting the standard that, yes, students need to be using this educationally. It can't just be used for testing. So yes, it's got to be used educationally, and yes, you're going to need to sort of document and have a clear rationale for why students need to use the PARC accommodations. Now, if you're a Smarter Balance state, again, Smarter Balance is 25 states and territories, and again, that will also go into effect in the 2014-2015 school year. And again, here is the website you can see on this page and on the following pages where you can go and get more information. There's an entire manual for both PARC and Smarter Balanced on what does this mean, and they're good manuals in the sense that they spell it out very specifically. And this particular Smarter Balance report just came out on September 11th, which is not too long ago. Now, the Smarter Balanced assessment is definitely based on Common Core standards, and again, it also has some universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations that are going to be allowed, some for all students and some for a specific group of students. However, I just want you to make sure that you know that under Smarter Balance, a member state can elect not to make available to its students any universal tool, designated support, or accommodation. So states do have some ability to sort of create their own guidelines on this. So again, under Smarter Balance, there are universal tools, much like PARC, designated supports, and accommodations. You can go to the website if you can't read this quite clearly, but go to the website. This is in one of the appendices in the manual. But universal tools are things like calculators or dictionaries or note-taking or spell check or Zoom, some tools are embedded, some tools are not embedded, like scratch paper obviously wouldn't be embedded into it as a universal tool. Designated supports that can be turned on and off is like masking, which allows you to just only focus, say, on one problem at a time or one specific area of the screen at a time. Color contrast, things that are not embedded would be like magnification or read aloud, scribe, things of that sort. Now, accommodations, obviously Braille, closed captioning they're talking about, and text-to-speech, they're talking about embedding these. We haven't seen these yet. They're these testing tools because they're still in the development stage. That's what Park and Smarter Balanced is all about. Non-embedded tools, again, calculators, and maybe a read aloud by an adult, that sort of thing. All right, so those are just some of the tools in Smarter Balanced. Now, interestingly, that Smarter Balanced is being very specific that they're, like Park, that only 1 to 2% of students with disabilities should be receiving these accommodations. Smarter Balanced is also saying for students in grades 3 to 5, the read aloud accommodation won't be available for reading tests. Now, it's different from math. So understand as you read through the guidelines on these things that oftentimes read aloud is more often permitted for math questions, but not for some of the literacy and specifically where students need to be reading aloud or reading information on their own. Now, Smarter Balance says for students in grades 6 to 8 and 11, the read aloud is available as an accommodation for, again, for a student whose need is documented on an IEP or a 504 plan. So the implications, Fuchs and Fuchs talk about the fact that the implications of denying accommodations to students when those accommodations are warranted, they consider it pretty serious that without accommodations, students may be disallowed the opportunity to demonstrate the competence they possess. This is why we provide kids with accommodations, to be able to show what they know. And when high-stakes consequences for individual students are associated with participation in accountability systems, it's essential for students to be permitted the test accommodations their disabilities warrant. I think those are two very clear, strong statements that justify the use of, or at least give a rationale for the accommodations that are often discussed for students with disabilities. Now, it's, again, going forward, there's a strong need for you to begin really clearly documenting evidence regarding the educational use of accommodations. So, again, the Common Core standards for reading under IDEA, No Child Left Behind, response to intervention, as well as AIM. Those are, again, all educational imperatives that support the use of accommodations in the classroom. Park and Smarter Balance have set guidelines for IEP and 504 teams to make decisions about accommodations for high-stakes testing. All right. The Park and Smarter Balance both talk about the fact that these accommodations should be not just occurring in testing situations alone, but occurring on a regular basis in classrooms. I think it's imperative that, again, that IEP and 504 teams document the need and the ongoing use of accommodations in order to make the case for testing profiles. Both Smarter Balance and Park, they have used different titles for these things, but for Smarter Balance, you may be creating what's called an individual student assessment accessibility profile that helps you makes you, it's sort of a decision-making for what accommodation. It's not really a decision-making tool. It's more of a profile and more of a form that's going to sort of talk about why this student needs what he needs. And under Park, it's called the personal needs profile. So those are terms you're going to hear down the road about documenting needs for students and use of accommodations. So I think we have a poll right here. If you would load that poll, Karen. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, I think so. The poll should be available, and what we need, yeah, there we go. Everyone's starting to enter their answers in. Great.
All righty. There we go. So what was the predominant approach to accommodation decision making in your school or district last year? And just select the one that most applies to you. Little or no discussion of accommodations routinely. Maybe a brief discussion, maybe as it relates to accommodation checklists attached to the IEP. The IEP team maybe discussed accommodations based on current levels of performance, or the IEP may discuss accommodations based on evidence of accommodation effectiveness, or something other than that. So see what your answers are.
68% voted, so we just need a couple more people to vote. Oh, it's going up. That means you're not falling asleep on us. That's good. No. All right, we'll do 5 set. Ooh, yeah, everyone's really cranking it in. We're almost at 100%. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Denise, some people wanted to say 3 and 4. So as you're looking at the results in a minute, we'll share the results.
I know, it's always hard when I make them only.
I know.
Right, it's tough. I have to actually make a tough decision. So the answer that was most common is that the IEP teams had discussions based on current levels of performance. So that's a good thing, you know, that we're talking about current levels of performance as it relates to students, say, reading abilities or the need for support for their reading disabilities. Some people are also close to the 44%, 37% brief discussion specific to an accommodation checklist. In terms of teams having discussions based on evidence of accommodation effectiveness, only 10% are saying that you have a process for that. All right, Ruth, go back to me.
It should be coming back. Let's see. We'll let you know when it goes. There you go. You're good, Denise.
All righty. All right, so I want to talk very briefly about, again, accommodation decision making and why it's so important to have a process. And I'm only going to go over a little bit of the research that's out there. Thomas Hare says that there's evidence that accommodation decisions for students with disabilities are not done as thoughtfully as they could, and that further the wrong accommodations may actually depress performance for some disabled students. So, you know, we all are out there trying to do the best thing for kids, and I think at one point I began to realize that for some of our students, maybe we were putting in accommodations for kids, and if it's not the right accommodation, we could actually be doing more harm than good in terms of that we weren't really measuring what students know. And when I started, with the Hyatt team, when we started to really discuss this, we realized we needed a process. This tool was developed with Linda Wilson and with the help of the Hyatt team, and it proved to be very useful, and it's really been great that Don Johnson has allowed us to share this with you via their website. Research on accommodation decisions. IEP teams make decisions in idiosyncratic ways with vague decision-making rules that are often focused on superficial barriers. Superficial barriers like, well, I think he'll be more comfortable if he has a read aloud, or I think he'll do better if he has a read aloud, without any real evidence of that. Schreiner and DeStefano talk about that. They did a review of accommodation practices in 3 school districts and found a wide variation in the provision of testing accommodations. In another study by Fuchs and Associates, teacher decisions did not correspond to the students who benefited from the accommodations, and students who got accommodations were disproportionately African American on free and reduced meals, or students with lower IQ. So that's clearly would be a concern. Tom Scher also says there's an ingrained prejudice against performing activities in ways that might be more efficient for disabled people, but that are different from how non-disabled people perform them. So there's a perception in education that disabilities have to be overcome, and therefore we shouldn't really put accommodations in place, because, you know, if they can't use it, they've got to be able to sort of, you know, learn the way that everybody else does it. So there is, I think he put his finger on some prejudice that we see regarding that at some times. Crawford and Ketterlin, in 2010, their findings of their research were that IA teams made most of the accommodation decisions. They tended to be based more on qualitative judgments, not on objective data. They tended to be based more on students' affect rather than performance. There usually was kind of a menu of accommodations that all students got. There wasn't a whole lot of variation. Implementation constraints affected decisions, and that one really concerns me because maybe there aren't enough computers, therefore you're not going to offer text-to-speech to students, and that's just plain not a good thing. Or maybe you don't have enough adult readers, so you're going to err in another direction in terms of accommodations decisions for that student. Also, lack of awareness of rationale and the goals for using accommodation is something that they saw in their research. This is one that also concerned me, and this was a study on teacher accuracy in assigning read-aloud accommodations of 1,218 4th grade through 8th grade students. And there was, what it showed is that the teachers' ratings of their students' needs for testing accommodations coincided with actual students' performance only half the time. That kind of makes it a coin toss, which isn't a great thing. So that is of great concern to those of us working with kids, that even though teachers are well-meaning and IEP teams are really well-meaning, maybe they don't have enough guidance to go on to make decisions that that coincide with actual student performance. This Fletcher and her associates, I think, summed up their study that was done on accommodations in middle school, saying that all too often in practice, accommodations are applied just because they're on a list of acceptable accommodation and the student has been identified with a disability. So I think that's not uncommon still, but I think going forward, because of online testing, because of the guidelines set by PARC and Smarter Balance, because of a greater emphasis on Common Core literacy standards for reading, I think we're seeing a real seeing the ground shift as it comes to the documentation of accommodations. Regulations or instructions for assigning accommodations for students with disabilities and students who are English language learners are more often policy-based and not well-defined. So many of you may have state guidelines that set out policy, but they may not really offer you specific guidance on who can use these accommodations. And so the teachers may not have enough information to go on to make accommodation decisions. So if there are any questions, I wanted to stop here and let my Don Johnston folks let me know if there's any questions up to this point that are burning questions that I should address.
Yeah, so far no one's typed in any, but go ahead, you guys, send some questions in.
Okay, I'll keep going because I'm sure there'll be more questions about the PARC.
Oh, here comes one. Does the legal background and aim that you spoke of cover students under 504? In Texas, dyslexia is covered under 504.
In Texas, dyslexia is covered under 504, is under AIM. AIM refers to students on IEPs. I think that's the question.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, I'm going to now talk about what the protocol for accommodations in reading is all about. It was developed again by Linda Wilson and I. We did the hard work of hammering it out. We sat around a table and sort of tried to say, what could we do that would help us make better informed decisions, and more importantly, what could we do to help teachers have a process for making more informed decisions. For those of you who know about the Hyatt team, you know that the Hyatt team is very, very focused on building capacity. We are not in the business of doing assessments as an assistive technology team as much as we are teaching teachers and giving teachers tools how to assess it on behalf of their students. So what is PAR? It's a formative assessment tool used to determine a student's optimal reading accommodation. Reading material is offered in 3 ways: through a student read aloud, through an adult reader, and through a text reader. And the optimal reading method is then determined through the student's ability to answer related comprehension questions. The thing that I want you to be very, very clear on is PAR is not to be used as, and it is not a test of reading ability. PAR builds on present levels of performance from standardized reading evaluations, and you begin with in gathering information about your student, knowing where your student's independent reading levels are, but PAR actually is a process to help you compare the effectiveness of reading accommodations. It's not a reading test. So the PAR process, we really got it down from many, many steps down to basically 3 basic steps. And the first part of the first step is student does an oral reading of a passage at his independent reading level. So I'll talk about the passages in just a minute. So, and this establishes the baseline on the student's reading speed and whether or not he really is effectively reading at that independent level. And then once the students read the passage, then comprehension questions are asked regarding that reading. The second step is an adult reader condition. And the adult then reads the passage at the student's grade level, not at the student's independent level now. That was in step 1. In step 2, you're shifting up to the student's grade level, and you're reading aloud to the student a passage, again at the grade level, and then comprehension questions would be asked thereafter. In the third step, you move to the text reader, again at grade level. So the student would read a passage on a device or a tablet and using text-to-speech, and then the student would answer comprehension questions after that. So those are the 3 basic steps of PAR. Now, if you want to go beyond that or you feel the need to go beyond that, you can move to sort of optional conditions. And so, for example, you may want to move to lower grade level reading passages. Let's say a student independent reading level is at a 3rd grade level, but he's in the 7th grade. Well, you might want to shift down. If he doesn't do well at the 7th grade level and the adult reader condition or the text reader condition, you might want to shift down a couple of grade levels to try to find that sweet spot for where the student might do best using an adult reader or using a text reader condition. So another condition that you can do is you can actually audio record. You can do it on a smartphone these days, but you could audio record one of the passages to see how a student does with an audio recording without, hopefully that student is using a book as well, but if you wanted to try out audio recordings, books on tape, that kind of thing, that might be another optional condition that you could add. Those audio passages are not included in the PAR process, mainly because it's difficult to sort of adjust the speed level when you're using an audio reading. So administering PAR, the first thing to do prior to administering PAR is you first need to identify the student's current instructional reading levels. You want to know if the student has been exposed to a text reader and to what extent. So you want to have a history of the student's exposure to text readers. You want to ascertain if the student's been provided with a human reader and how often. So there is a form that you can download from the website where you can then fill in the information, this background information. You want to make sure you have a quiet space to administer the PAR. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes per condition. The passages are longer for the higher grades and shorter for the lower grades. And you want to select the appropriate reading passages. So you will have a choice of narrative passages and expository passages. Those of you who are familiar with Common Core standards know there's a real push for students to be reading expository text as well as a narrative text. The research basically suggests that a lot of times our kids with disabilities are presented with narrative text and don't get to move towards expository text. The other thing that you'll want to do is to consider students' interest when choosing a topic. So there's at least 4 passages on grades level 3 to 10 that you can choose from. So 4 passages for narrative, 4 passages for expository. Now, all of the passages were written by a freelance writer who creates grade-level writing and reading materials for basal textbooks, publishers, and supplemental publishers. The passages were written to be similar to materials students would encounter in the classroom environment. They were scored for readability at the mid-grade level, so mid-3rd grade, mid-4th grade, mid-5th grade, using a Flesch-Kincaid formula. We looked at lots of different formulas, and that was the one that most publishers use when they're creating materials. educational materials. The comprehension questions were written to be considerate in an effort to minimize comprehension errors due to question complexity. And we have Don Johnson to thank for putting the resources together to create all of these passages at the different grade levels. One of the things that Don Johnston did in 2013 was put out a survey to people. There's over 4,000 people who've downloaded PAR, and we put out a survey to find out a little bit about how people are using it and what they were finding. And one of the things that I was pleased to see is that the question was, to what extent have scores on the student read aloud passages been in agreement with the documented independent reading level of that student? And usually the same or close to agreement within 1 year were the two most common responses, which is really terrific because very often students' reading scores might be 6 months to a year old anyway. But yes, so students, the passages have been shown by at least by popular use, to be in agreement with documented independent reading levels of the students. So that was good to see, and we were glad to have that feedback. The comprehension questions, there are 4 types of comprehension questions that follow each passage. A topic question that gets at the main theme, literal or explicit comprehension questions, factual questions, vocabulary question, something to do with a word in the passage, and then inferential questions, which requires the student to be able to use reason or background experience. So this is an example of what the passage, the kinds of questions that might be asked after the passage was either read by the student, the adult read the passage, or using a text reader. So this is a 5th grade passage, and you can see the comprehension questions there, and there are the scoring forms can be downloaded for each of the passages, and the passages, of course, can be downloaded as well. I just want you to note at the bottom where it says down here, green 7 to 8 correct, yellow 3 to 6 correct, red 1 to 2 correct. I'm going to talk about this in just a minute, but I just wanted you to note that on the form. We also ask students which type of reading they liked most, and it's important to make sure that the student is responding to the reading method and not the passage, not the content of the passage, not the topic of the passage. So what we find it's really important to ask students how they feel about the use being read to aloud, or the use of text readers, or reading by themselves. It has a significant impact on, or should have an impact on, the kinds of decisions that the discussion about decisions on reading accommodations. This is the PAR administration results form. So this is an example of the form that you can download, and this is where you can sort of summarize the results. Over here, here's the student's oral reading, the adult reader condition, the text reader condition, and then the optional condition. And notice over here, there's kind of a chart, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, where you can kind of color code how the student does well with under the different conditions. And then down here you can, on the right under additional observations, you can make some comments about how well you think the student did. Part of the strength of PAR when you do a PAR with students one-on-one is you really get a feel for their comfort level with under different reading conditions. You get to see, you learn a lot about their comfort level and their success with reading. So again, if the student answers comprehension questions in the top quartile, then that is color-coded as green. If the student is in the bottom quartile of correct responses on comprehension questions, it's color-coded as red. And the middle 2 quartiles would be color-coded as yellow. So I'll give you an example of that in just a minute. So here's an example, an example of a PAR results summary chart that you could fill in with the color coding, where the student's independent reading level was at a 3rd grade level. When the student read at that independent level, that student still struggled with comprehension questions when they were reading by themselves. When the student was provided with an adult reader, the student performed well, top quartile, and then in the text reader condition, the student struggled a little bit. So you could sort of get a visual kind of a visual of how the student does well. And we found this worked the best for our families to sort of understand the accommodations for their child. One of the things, again, when Don Johnston did their survey, we asked is, how useful have you found PAR when making accommodation decisions? And we're really pleased that people were finding it to be useful, and we hope that you'll give it a try as well. We also asked, how often have you found that PAR-based accommodation recommendation has changed accommodation the student used prior to the PAR evaluation? And the response was pretty amazing, and that people said very often or often. You would expect that it's not always going to be the case, but we were pleased to see that people felt that this was a process that worked for them and actually resulted in changes in accommodation decisions. Here's a couple of, I'll open this for questions in just a minute, but here's a couple of examples of how it was used. This is a 7th grader with learning disabilities and attention deficit. She read at an independent 5th grade level independently, and when answered the comprehension questions did quite well. When we then provided a passage where the adult read the passage to her, and this was the accommodation she was most accustomed to, she again did very well. She had very little text reader experience. When we provided the text reader condition to her, again at her grade level, she did not do well at all. She did very poorly. So we even took it down to her independent reading level and took it down to a passage at the 5th grade level to see how she would do with the text reader. And again, she did not do well with a text reader. So that was evidence of the fact that we shouldn't just leap into using a text reader, even though we thought she might be appropriate for a text reader, and both the parent and the teacher were saying we really want her to have a more independent method of accessing text. To merely sort of plunk her in front of a text reader was probably not going to be the best approach for this particular student. So this kind of a profile led to a lot more discussion about how to make that student to create some readiness for using a text reader and create some proficiency for using a text reader. This is a student with a 7th grader with high functioning autism, and this was interesting because the student clearly said that he comprehended more when the text was read aloud by an adult or using a text reader. Now the problem is for this student, he was very high functioning student with autism, and he technically didn't qualify for an accommodation as a read aloud condition. Because he was reading on grade level. And yet when we used the PAR process with him, it clearly documented that the student and the parent, what they were reporting to us was evident that he really did better when the adult read aloud or when the text reader was read aloud. Now this might not qualify this student under PAR or Smarter Balance, but it certainly led to qualifying him for more accommodations educationally in the classroom. Here's one that came from a friend in Maine who has been using PAR a while, and you see that she's color-coded it in a simple, just using markers. The student did not perform very well when reading at his independent, the test indicated his independent reading level was at the 3rd grade level, but when he was shifted to an adult reader at the 8th grade level and a text reader, the student really did quite well in both accommodated conditions. There are more case studies. You will find these in the manual when you download PAR. This one might be a little smaller, but it's harder to see, but the case study will talk about background information, the results, summaries and recommendations, and recommendations. So it gives you an example of how you might use PAR. The protocol for accommodations and reading results for this particular student, again, were similar to the one for the student I just showed previously in May. And when he was given an adult read and text reader condition, really did quite well. And this was a student where they had been giving him adapted materials to read, so materials that were at a younger grade level because he struggled so much with reading on his own. And this, again, was evidence for the fact that he really needed to be reading and could read and understand materials at grade level under accommodated conditions when given the opportunity to use, again, either an adult read aloud or a text reader. So questions about PAR. Do we have any questions?
We do. So Denise, there's one. It says, are you aware of more specific guidelines when it comes to providing text-to-speech or having a test read aloud to students? No doubt all students benefit from having assessments administered individual, small group, or read aloud. We are looking for some guidelines when it would be most beneficial for an assessment to be read aloud.
Ruth, you might want to help me sort of summarize that question. I probably didn't grasp all of it. But I think that this person is saying, what's the process for...
Yeah, I was asking some questions back because I think this process, I guess my question back is, what do you think of this process? Because I think that's the intention of this process is to identify.
That was going to be my response, which is using the PAR process to make decisions about it. Now, you're not going to necessarily test everyone in the classroom for using the PAR process. That would not be very time efficient. My suggestion is to identify those students where you really don't know what accommodation works best for them. Those are the ones that you should get started with. Kids who are really struggling with getting information out of text when they read by themselves, when they read in a non-accommodated condition, where you're really not clear what accommodation will work best for them. And you really need to sort of be able to stand by your decision about accessible instructional materials, about what accommodation might be used for testing. And that's really why the PAR process that's what the PAR process was designed to do.
Right, and then this one I could probably answer. So PAR materials start at 3rd grade, and we had somebody asking about higher grade levels, which, so I think that's kind of exciting and scary news for us. So when we started this, most people were looking at students, more middle school. We thought going down to 3rd grade would be fine. We have added some additional reading passages. Right now, we haven't looked at the free version, but we do have a new version called PAR Online, and we know that we will have grade level passages going all the way down to 1st grade and all the way up till 12th grade for that. And then we're still figuring out what we want to do in terms of the print version. So you'll get more information on that. Another question, a concern previously with an adult reading a test is that she would inadvertently give a cue to the correct answer. Any input on that? It's a great point.
It's a really great question, and there is research that really shows the downside. I didn't include a slide this time on that, but that really talks about the downside of read out louds, and that sometimes people unintentionally, they don't even necessarily know they're doing it, give the student, use inflection or some other something else to sort of give the student a hint as to what the answer might be, or the student is picking up on body language. So there's actually research that shows the downsides of adult readers. And again, I think that certainly when adults read, and especially when instructional assistants might be reading to a student, there need to be very clear parameters for how to do an adult read with a student, and that is clearly not a good idea, is to start giving kids hints, because it really undermines what you're really trying to do is to get them to comprehend material and to be able to respond to material on their own. If they're looking to you for facial features, or if they're looking to you for hints, then they're really not processing the material, they're just processing your face. So yeah, that's a problem with adult read aloud conditions.
And Karen said that we have another webinar with Darren Avey, and he's going to talk about how their district is taking some of these new accommodations and how they're thinking about that because of this. This was one of the drivers, is that they felt like adults were giving too many hints. So he's from Texas. So, and then we just have Anna. We think you're sending us love notes. We have some some excess CCs and Vs. So either you're practicing your writing, but you'll have to resend us one. Okay, here's another one. Have you trained paraprofessionals in schools to administer the PAR, or are teachers doing this, Denise?
Yeah, I think I'm going to move on to some slides that I have to go, if that's okay, unless there's another question, because I think it addresses this person's question.
I think we're good. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to move on because I want to absolutely answer that question. Who who should be delivering PAR, who can be administering PAR. Again, the Hyatt team is really very committed to building capacity in schools, teaching teachers how to use tools to make good accommodation decisions. So we started, when we started using PAR, we had a very specific kind of way to roll it out that I just want to talk about for a minute or two. So let me talk about Baltimore County first, one of our neighboring counties here in the Maryland area. They started very systematically. In the summer of 2012, they decided to sort of have 6 pilot schools. They provided full-day sessions of PAR training and Kurzweil training. That happens to be the tool that was used in that particular county. They also began to sort of offer sessions throughout the year in the summer and followed up with focus group sessions to be sure that people were comfortable using the process. So that's an example of what Baltimore County did. In Montgomery County, again, we use the capacity building approach, and we kind of use a triage approach to mentoring and support on the use of PAR. So very often we might have a teacher who really might be a special educator, might be a general educator. It really makes no difference to us who we train on this, but we would sort of make a decision in the moment, not in the moment, but after speaking with that person, to say, okay, how can we help you with this? Sometimes with some teachers, we felt after talking with them that we really needed to model the process with them once, and then there was an expectation that they would be able to do this going forward. Other times, once people had sort of more of an understanding of the PAR process or had observed it, they would go off and feel more comfortable doing it on their own. It's not a difficult process. At other times, we found that we've had teachers who are very comfortable with this process. They're comfortable with assessment. This is not something out of the ordinary for them, and we could direct them simply to the video of Linda demonstrating the PAR process on the Don Johnston website, or direct them to the manual to download, and they would feel comfortable maybe doing it on their own or calling us if they have questions. So again, we kind of use a triage approach based on the individual that's asking about accommodations and making good accommodation decisions. We also, in Montgomery County, and I am a former team leader of the Hyatt team, but I know that the team is still using multiple approaches to professional development on PAR. So it's kind of UDL for adults, so we want to make sure that teachers can get information about PAR in more than one way. So not just face-to-face information, not just a manual, but maybe a webinar, a live webinar about using PAR, or some kind of a helpful guide on how to get started with PAR, or what we send them links to tools that help them get started. So we make sure that there are multiple approaches to professional development to support people on the use of PAR. My suggestions on getting started using PAR is to in Baltimore County, I don't think I mentioned that in Baltimore County, they paired special ed teachers with reading teachers. That's how they got started. Those were the professionals that they kind of targeted for the initial training. So my suggestion on getting started using PAR is to first watch the video with a peer buddy, and that video is on the Don Johnston website. It's just a very brief, it's probably a 4-minute video of Linda going through the PAR process, and it really just gives you a comfort level that, oh, okay, I can get this, I can do this. Of course, you've got to download the materials. I would administer PAR with a peer buddy the first time that you do it. Because the first time you do it, you're kind of shuffling materials around, and it's always good to have a peer buddy to sort of help you with that. And then really begin to, again, identify those students who you are not sure what accommodation is working best for them, and you know that they're struggling with reading comprehension. So figure out who those students are, and really, as we say, put it on the clock, which is put those students in your schedule and do a student a month or a student every 2 to 3 weeks, and just put it on the clock, put it on your schedule. Don't say, when I have time I'll do this, but actually get that done by putting it on your schedule to sort of administer PAR with a given number of students where you're unsure what the accommodation works best. Focus groups to discuss results are a good thing if you're in a school where you might be embarking on the use of PAR within a school. And you can also, on the website, the John Johnson website, there's something called the AT Collective. You can go to, it's a blog post site, and you can go and select the PAR group. And within that PAR group, if you have any questions that you want to direct to me, you can direct questions to me, and I get pinged when there are questions there, and I can go and answer them for you. So if you want to post questions, or if you want to share your findings or discuss findings, you can put it on the AT Collective. That's just an example. There's a screenshot of what the AT Collective looks like. I think to sort of wrap up here, and I'll maybe have a little bit more time for questions, research is never going to answer all the questions that states face related to accommodation decisions. Reasoned judgment is going to have to take a role in these decisions. And Thurlow, who's really an expert on testing and testing accommodation issues, she goes on to say there's nothing like database decisions to determine which accommodations are useful to students and which they will actually use. I think of overall importance, you want to make sure that you're using your resources wisely. It's important that accommodations are provided only to those students who are determined to need them based on documented benefits. At the same time, I think it's important to ensure that students have access to necessary accommodations for both instruction in the classroom as well as for testing going forward. So I want to thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate how many of you have logged on and are interested in maybe pursuing this and giving this a try with your students. Ruth, I will see if there's any more questions.
Great.
Hang in there.
So another question was, have speech-language pathologists been involved in training and testing students from here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's really strong evidence in terms of, that language and literacy are very, very much related one to the other. So, kids with language deficits are often kids with literacy deficits. So there's lots of speech pathologists have expressed an interest in having a tool to look at this. Yeah.
Right, and I would say we get to kind of see, we ask the titles for when people download, and I would say it's really interesting to see the range of titles. Like school psychologist is another title we see fairly.
Lots of diagnosticians using this.
Yeah, and literacy specialist, RTI. There's another district in Maryland that I think they're more, the interventionist type of people. So again, I think we're seeing, and just as Denise designed these tools, it's for a wide range. It's not just, a speech pathology tool or an OT tool. So I think that's the exciting
I think it's
part.
any member of the IEP team. I think it's just a matter of making a decision as an IEP team as to who's going to sort of investigate this.
Right.
And making sure that you have the evidence that you need to document those accommodations, both in the classroom and maybe for testing down the road.
Yeah. And I think with this new testing that we can do math read aloud for even outside of IEP, we're going to see more people involved in that decision making.
Yep.
So just, Karen wants me to make sure everyone knows you can download PAR now too. That's free. So if you do, go to donjohnson.com/PAR, and it's a free download. So go ahead and get that. Just because there's a couple questions about PAR online and some of the training issues that Denise was even talking about, that's really the reason why we did PAR online, is to make, we found that out of the many people who have downloaded PAR, a lot of people are still just struggling with time to train their staff and get them up and running. So we see that PAR online could be a solution for that. Pricing, I don't know, right? So I'll have to get, we'll send information about that. What I do know is there's like two approaches. Right now we have what's called more of a consumer version where you'll be buying kind of either like one test at a time or a couple tests. Long term we'll be having a way you could do this more district-wide, that type of thing. So let's see. Oh, Denise, go ahead.
The paper-based version of PAR is the free tool, and PAR Online was really designed to maybe allow you to do it maybe even with small groups of students, and because the student could take this online, the student would be able to sort of do it more on his own rather than using a one-to-one kind of teacher resource time.
Perfect. And then another question was, how long would you say it generally takes to administer PAR per student?
I think I stated previously about 10 to 15 minutes per condition, depending on the student, depending on the length of the passage and the student's comfort level with reading. So some of the passages, of course, at the younger grade levels are shorter, and then some of the passages as you get to the higher grades are longer. So it's about 10 to 15 minutes per condition. So we really designed it to be, that could be done sort of at the middle and high school level in one period, one educational period of time.
Great. And then they wanted to know, with the free downloadable version, what reading passages do you have access to, or do you pay for those?
Well, the passages for grade 3 to 10 are there for free. Yeah.
Right.
And there's 4 passages for a narrative, 4 passages for expository.
Okay, we'll wait for a couple more questions. You're getting a lot of thank yous, and great job and wonderful presentation, Denise, so thank you. We'll hang tight for another couple questions.
I just wanted to sort of say thank you for tuning in. I think this is a real shift. I think we're seeing definitely renewed interest in accommodations because of the move towards online testing to determine college and career readiness, and I think this is a time when we really need to start getting ready for what's coming down the road. Certainly we should be getting ready to support students in the classroom today, not just for next year, but I think there's additional imperatives to really start developing a process in your district for making sure that you can put forth a rationale for why a student needs an accommodation.
Great. Yeah, we have, please note specific website with so people want to know, we do have a website where there is a video model of Linda doing the assessment. So will that be, we can send that in our follow-up, Karen? Okay, so just look for a web link on that. It's available on our AT Collective site. So that's the place you want to look at that. Somebody here has said it's a great tool, so we have people who are already using it, and I hope you use these webinars too to, as another way to just get the message out to a broader audience. So.
And for those of you who are using PAR, let me know every once in a while on the AT Collective on the blog how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Great.
We have some pleas for expanding the passages. So we heard that. Somebody else said they use it all the time. That's great. And sorry, we're going through. There's lots of little thank yous coming in and great presentations. So hold on. I'm just making sure we have them all. Thank you for this information. One of the barriers in schools is time for training, but this process looks like it's very valuable. And they're glad to know for the AT Collective site. So thanks. Yeah, I think, the districts that are, I think it's just making sense finally for people. So I think it was too, I don't know. I think people are really going gung-ho, so.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more discussion about this going forward than ever before because of college and career standards. And
exactly.
Online testing, yeah.
Your example with the student with autism, I was in a district where they probably, with that scenario, they would go back and test the student to see how high they were because they think that some of their special ed students can be in AP classes. And so they were hoping to identify which students could go above grade level and get into some of those AP classes. So
great idea.
It was kind of a really cool, and that was a special ed director, talk about thinking big, so that was exciting.
Yeah,
so
and that's an optional condition, right?
Wouldn't that be cool? I know. I'm like, I love that because we do know that, right? We do know some of our kids can even read, and that's, maybe that student felt like he could do even harder work with that accommodation.
Well, we know often that they can read. The question is, can they comprehend? So yeah, that's a great way to figure it out, just to make sure.
So all right, I think we're done. Just one final comment that will handle, I think, the rest of the emails or the rest of the questions. We're going to, as a wrap-up, we'll have this recorded video available on our web with a web link, and we'll send you the PowerPoints, and we'll send you links to AT Collective so you can find all the other goodies, such as doing a PAR party is another kind of implementation idea too. So You'll be getting all that information in a follow-up. And in the meantime, you can go ahead and download your PAR just by going to donjohnson.com/PAR. And will you be receiving a confirmation participating in this webinar? You'll get the email following up saying thank you for attending, so if that works for you. Or you can ask for, if you're looking for professional development, a PDU, we can give you that. Just put that in an email and we would be happy to send that out. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everybody have a good afternoon.
You too, Denise. Thank you. This was really nice, and nice job adding all the testing information. That was timely.
All right.
I'm going to answer just a couple more little detail-y ones, so I'll be on for a little bit.